So Square is the latest in a series of billionaire love affairs for Bitcoin. Company Square recently tweeted that it had purchased $50 million in Bitcoin, with CEO Jack Dorsey calling Bitcoin an instrument of global economic empowerment and a way for people to secure their financial future. Wow, are we talking about the same thing here? Instrument of global empowerment. Bitcoin. Yeah, he's talking about Bitcoin. And so in this video, I'm going to go over the list of billionaires that have recently joined Team Bitcoin this past year and go over the reasons why they have decided to do so. And for those of you who are new here, welcome to High Value, where we have been on Team Bitcoin since 2016. Damn, it feels good to say that. So yeah, continuing with Square, the company's CEO, Jack Dorsey, who is also the CEO of Twitter, released a Bitcoin investment white paper saying that it is a believer in Bitcoin's potential for continued growth. The white paper went on to say that given the unprecedented uncertainty from a macroeconomic and currency regime perspective, it believes that now is the right time to expand its largely US dollar denominated balance sheet and make a meaningful investment in Bitcoin. Okay, let's rewind to the statement that says, given the unprecedented uncertainty from a macroeconomic and currency regime perspective. So let's break down what that means. So what's going on right now that is unprecedented is a policy that's called modern monetary theory, or MMT. The central idea of MMT is that governments can and should print as much money as needed to support full employment and to stimulate the economy. Proponents argue that robust economies like the US can take on large amounts of debt without going bankrupt and can print trillions of dollars in money without causing inflation. They cite Japan as an example of decades of money printing and taking on large amounts of debt without any catastrophe happening so far. So let me get this straight. Basically, modern monetary theory argues that governments can take on large amounts of debt and print trillions of dollars of money, and that's okay. And there are no consequences. And this is something that governments all around the world are doing as we speak. In the US, 22% of all US dollars in existence was created in 2020 alone. Yeah, it's fine, right? So when you're a company and you're sitting on billions of dollars in cash reserves, and then you find out that your government is debasing your currency by printing 22% more of it this year alone, yeah, I can see why companies want to diversify into other things. Last month, business intelligence company MicroStrategy announced that it has adopted Bitcoin as its primary treasury reserve asset. Its CEO, Michael Saylor, explained that the decision to invest in Bitcoin was driven in part by a confluence of macro factors affecting the economic and business landscape, and that it believes is creating long-term risks. Those macro factors include unprecedented government financial stimulus measures, including quantitative easing adopted around the world. In considering various asset classes for investment, MicroStrategy decided on Bitcoin because it believed Bitcoin would provide not only a reasonable hedge against inflation, but also the prospect of earning a higher return than other investments. The press release went on to say that Bitcoin is digital gold, harder, stronger, faster, and smarter. Reminds me of a Daft Punk song, than any money that has preceded it. As far as my research goes, MicroStrategy currently holds a total of $425 million worth of Bitcoin. Now let's break down what the press release said about Bitcoin being a reasonable hedge against inflation and why it is considered digital gold, that is harder, stronger, faster, smarter. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Harder means Bitcoin is scarce in supply. In fact, the supply of Bitcoin is literally fixed in hard code. There will only be 21 million Bitcoins in existence ever. Further, the growth rate of Bitcoin is fixed at a constant rate, with the last Bitcoin to be minted in the year 2140. Now, the creation of Bitcoin is done through a process called mining, where people contribute computing power to secure the network and validate transactions. In return for contributing this computing power, they get newly minted Bitcoins. Bitcoins. This hard-coded supply means Bitcoin's inflation rate is fixed and predictable, while the need to dedicate computing power in order to mint new Bitcoins means that you can't just print new Bitcoins out of thin air the same way governments are currently printing money. It's stronger because Bitcoin transactions are broadcasted to an open, online ledger called the Bitcoin blockchain, which is maintained and secured by the computing power of Bitcoin miners. Further, participants around the world called nodes are constantly downloading and verifying copies of the Bitcoin blockchain. So because of this, if you want to compromise the Bitcoin blockchain, you not only need to expend more computing power than all the miners in the world combined, but also trick all the nodes around the world into accepting your erroneous transaction. Mathematically, it is impossible. Now, of course, Bitcoin is faster because it can be sent anywhere across the world with minimal fees. Now, Bitcoin is smarter because a Bitcoin can be further subdivided into 100 million units called Satoshis for smaller transactions. So yeah, MicroStrategy is putting their money where their mouth is. And in May, billionaire hedge fund manager Paul Tudor Jones wrote a letter to his investors expressing his concern for monetary inflation and announcing his newfound love for Bitcoin. He said that it is likely that the M2 money supply will increase by 20 to 40% by year end. We're so far at 22% and we still have a few months left, so he's on target there. He cited a few asset classes that could serve as hedges against inflation, such as gold, NASDAQ 100 stocks, commodities, and Bitcoin, but ultimately said that at the end of the day, the best profit maximizing strategy is to own the fastest horse. He then continued that if he were forced to forecast, his bet is that the fastest horse will be Bitcoin. Some other highlights in the letter are such as calling Bitcoin the only large tradable asset in the world that has a known fixed maximum supply, and also the most compelling argument for owning Bitcoin is the coming digitization of currency everywhere. Now, from what I gather, Paul Tudor Jones has allocated between 1 to 2% of his $40 billion hedge fund to Bitcoin. So you've got the CEO of Square and Twitter, the CEO of MicroStrategy, and a hedge fund manager all throwing their support for Bitcoin, and they're all citing the same reasons: monetary inflation hedge. And that they chose Bitcoin because it is scarce like gold, but also digital. And now you may be thinking, what should I do? Should I ditch all of my investments and go all in on Bitcoin like a good FOMO boy? Well, if you're a gambling adrenaline junkie like me back in 2016 and enjoy waking up multiple times at night to have to check your Bitcoin balance because you're so paranoid of losing all your money, then be my guest. But if you are a sensible investor who wants to enjoy 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep at night, then I would advise the same course of action that Paul Tudor Jones took, which was to allocate a small amount of your assets to Bitcoin as a hedge. In fact, I came across a research paper that said that allocating between 2 to 5% to Bitcoin significantly improved the performance of a traditional stock and bonds portfolio without affecting the portfolio's volatility. Now, 2 to 5% is a reasonable allocation. It gives you enough skin in the game to be motivated to do more research into Bitcoin. And that's what I did in 2016. I started off with a small amount just to get my feet wet to motivate me to go down the rabbit hole of learning about Bitcoin. And once I did learn about Bitcoin, my conviction grew stronger. And then I allocated a larger chunk into Bitcoin because I believed in it. So are we going to hear of more billionaires jumping onto the Bitcoin bandwagon before the year ends? I wouldn't be surprised if we do. In fact, comment below which company you think will be next to announce their endorsement for Bitcoin. I kind of have a hunch which announcement will make major headlines. The day that Elon Musk says Tesla is buying Bitcoin. Anyway, thank you for watching.